Hi, I'm Katie Fox and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about something a little bit different, kind of about my health and hopefully to educate people a little bit, at least, on epilepsy and how it affects your life and how it's affected my life and how I got to where I am today. I think it's important to talk about because of how I got to where I am today. Because I wasn't born with epilepsy, like I was potentially born with the ability to develop epilepsy, but that it was something that happened in my life that triggered it. And since then, my life has not been the same. And I think that that's important to talk about for a lot of reasons. I think it's important to talk about because it has to do with abusive relationships, and I might have kind of a young audience, and you might think that abusive relationships won't follow you around forever, that once you're out of them, maybe some of the trauma will stay, but it won't affect you completely for the rest of your life. And I'm proof that that is not true all the time. So where do I begin? I guess I begin with when I was 24 or 23 maybe. I got an email from an ex-boyfriend. He wasn't just any ex-boyfriend. He was the guy I thought for sure that I was going to end up with. He was my high school sweetheart, and I loved him more than anything. Obviously not as much as I love my husband now, but at the time I loved him more than anything. We had been together for about 2.5, 3 years, throughout high school and a bit of university as well. And at the start of the relationship, I guess I should preface it by saying he is a narcissist. At the start of the relationship, he love bombed me. Now, what love bombing is where the person showers you with affection and attention and makes you believe that they are this perfect person that they are not. So for the first 6 months of our relationship, he would just randomly text message me about how beautiful I was and how perfect I was and how lucky he was and how he couldn't wait to shower me with love and affection for the rest of my life, and how he couldn't imagine life without me, and that he was already falling in love with me, all this kind of stuff. And he was the only guy in high school that I found attractive. And we met kind of by chance through a mutual friend. And he had been in a bad relationship previously where he was abused, I guess. Allegedly, I don't know. I don't know, because everything that he told me is chance, right? So he got out of a toxic relationship, and my friend introduced us, and she sung his praises about how wonderful he was, how sweet he was, how he deserved to have a good girlfriend, a girlfriend that would treat him well, that he was the nicest guy she's ever met, and that he deserved so much to be happy. So I was continually told and shown by him for the first 6 months that he was this amazing guy. And even when he became a not so amazing guy, I had in the back of my head that he was, because everyone told me that he was the sweetest guy they ever met. Because he was a narcissist and he projected who he wanted people to think he was to everyone. And so he had this thing, which really bothered me because I'm the opposite, where he had to be liked by everyone. So he'd put on whatever face suited him in that moment to be liked by that person. He couldn't stand it when people didn't like him. It drove him crazy. I do not care at all. I'm the opposite. So it drove me nuts. But that was one thing about him, was that he needed to be liked by everyone. No matter how small or insignificant that person was, no matter how little he was going to see them, he had to be liked by them. So the first 6 months were great. He was amazing. I was going through kind of dealing with my trauma because I had been in a relationship with an older man when I was 16 and lost my virginity not consensually. And so I was dealing with a lot of stuff while I was, but I didn't want to pass up this really nice guy, you know, that I was told was amazing. So he helped me kind of deal with my trauma, which I still appreciate because at the time he was still a very nice guy. Once he knew that he had me, once I was in love with him, he started to treat me very, very badly. He was away at university, 2.5 hours away, and he wouldn't text me back. He wouldn't answer the phone. He would turn his phone off. He would sometimes make it so that I could only email him once a day if I was good. And if I was bad, then I couldn't email him for 2 days. It was very much a controlling environment where he made me feel like absolute shit about myself at all times. He was no longer the guy who told me that I was beautiful and wonderful and that he couldn't imagine his life without me. That man had disappeared, and in his place was this guy who I no longer recognized. He was going behind my back talking to women. He was doing a bunch of stuff. He would spend literal summers at my parents' house because my parents were pretty lax about rules. And he would go and see his friends. So he would stay at my house, but he wouldn't see me. And if I told him that it hurt me, he would say that his friends were more important and that I would have to deal with it. For some reason, though, because I grew up in an environment that was abusive and violent, and because I had a father especially who was abusive and violent, I sought out violent and abusive men. I thought that that's what I deserved, that that's what all men were like. Because my first experience with a man was awful, and then my second experience with a man was awful, and I just kind of thought that's what I deserved, or that's all that was out there. So anyway, I was madly in love with him. I don't know why. We had this dark, gothic romance, Tim Burton style, that made me feel like we were this dark, deep, romantic thing that we really weren't. And I'm not sure why I felt that way. It was just how we were. We broke up. He ended up moving on with a girl right away, so I'm pretty sure that he cheated on me. And that was that. And I was really, really, really hurt after that, and it took me a long time to trust again and to get into another relationship. I promise this all has to do with epilepsy. So when I was 23, I got an email from him And he said he wanted to come up and visit, that he heard the area that I lived in was beautiful, and that he wanted to come see it for himself, and that he missed me and he missed my friendship. And I said, okay, sure, you can come visit, but we're only going to be friends. Like, that is it. We're not going to do the whole relationship thing because we don't mix well together. So he came up, and it was just the beginning of winter. It was beautiful, and we went up and like went hiking and drove up a mountaintop and talked a lot. And he was the guy I remember from the first 6 months we were together. Then we went back to my place, and he spent the night. And before he went to bed, I just kind of unloaded on him my past experience with my last boyfriend, where I was in a physically abusive relationship. And I told him everything and just kind of got it off my chest, and I was crying and everything. So it was all still very fresh to me. And he reached over and he hugged me, and I was really afraid because I knew that a hug meant, like, once we touched each other, I knew that it meant we were doomed. And I can't explain that. I don't know how to explain that. It's just, you know, that feeling that when you hug someone who you really, really love and your entire body is just warm and it feels like home. That's how it felt. So he hugged me, and the hug turned into more. And as it turned out, he wasn't there to be friends with me. He told me that he had not been intimate with anyone other than his last girlfriend, which was the girlfriend that he left me for, essentially. And that I had only been with one other person too, so that all made sense, and we were all, you know, on the same path. And he was living in Portland, Oregon at the time, going to chiropractic school. So I knew I wasn't going to see him again for a while, but we were going to keep in touch. So we did. We were texting kind of, you know, off and on. And then he wanted me to fly out to come see him. So I did. It was really, really scary to fly out to see someone who I'd only seen one time in like 2 years. But I did it because I was head over heels for him again, because I didn't learn the first time. So I flew out there and I saw him, and as it turned out, he lied to me about everything. He lied to me about how many people he had slept with, which, without protection. He, as it turns out, had slept with everyone, basically, that he went to school with, that he shared a classroom with. And he had a special friends with benefits relationship with his best friend, who was a girl, who he deemed not good enough for him because she wasn't attractive enough and she was way taller than him. And basically he wanted me as his trophy and her as his side piece, essentially. I didn't know any of this. Now, I'd flown there with like a 6-month return ticket, because that's as long as you can be in the States for until you have to come back without a visa. So I was stuck there, and at the time my parents were going through a pretty tumultuous divorce with infidelity, and so I didn't really want to be home anyway. And I was home trying to save up money because I was just living on my own, paying for everything on my own with my abusive ex. Yeah, so I was stuck there, and I tried to make the best of it, and I tried to break up their friends with benefits thing because I was told that's why I was there, was to be his girlfriend, etc., etc. And so basically, in trying to do so, I broke him. He lost his mind. He became super abusive. He stopped shaving. He stopped cutting his hair. He stopped showering as frequently. He stopped eating. He stopped working out, and working out was like his big thing. And he just deteriorated into this something that I didn't know what he was. We couldn't even go get groceries unless it was 3 a.m. because he didn't want anyone to see him and recognize him in that state. So some days I would just go without eating, or exist on purely jet black coffee because he would refuse to leave the house and I didn't know where anything was in Portland. So I was kind of like a prisoner. And he would hide his phone from me because obviously he was talking to her and obviously they were having communications and they were doing their stuff. And, you know, I tried really hard to make this thing work. I tried hard to accept that she was part of his life, but she would cross all the boundaries and make me very, very, very uncomfortable. So she made it kind of impossible for me to be okay with it because I didn't know about it to begin with, and she was crossing way too many boundaries for me to be comfortable, and he was okay with that because he was secretly madly in love with her. He just didn't want to admit it because that meant that he had to admit that he wasn't going to end up with a trophy, which is what he wanted. Anyway, in the end, I ended up going home. He dropped out of school temporarily, and he drove me home. And after that, we barely talked. It was back to he would turn his phone off, or he just wouldn't text me back, or etc., etc., etc. More just abuse and neglect and awfulness while he was talking to her the entire time. So one of the ways that he would communicate with me willingly was we would play Resident Evil 5 and 6 together online. And one time we were playing Resident Evil, I think 6, online together, and I disappeared. And I disappeared because I was throwing up all the way from my bedroom down the hallway to the bathroom, all the way back. And then I started to have my first seizure. It was like 7 minutes long. I bit my tongue really, really bad. I had blood all down my face. And I came to afterwards because no one noticed. Luckily, I didn't asphyxiate on my vomit. I went up to my mom with blood down my face and I said, I think I had a seizure. And so we went to the hospital. And thus began my epilepsy journey, which meant lots of medications that cost me years of my life that I don't remember anymore. Jobs that I wasn't able to do anymore because my brain wasn't really there anymore, and the pills that I was on caused me to at one point forget how to spell my own name. And I was working at the hospital at the time in medical records, so I couldn't just not be with it. I was also having tons of grand mal or tonic-clonic seizures at work at the time, which doesn't make you look very good to your employer. Obviously, they understand that it's not, intentional, but it doesn't make you look good. So it super hampered my future. We broke up after that. But basically, what I want to stress is that abusive relationships can change your life in ways that you may not foresee. It's not just the trauma that you carried with you forever. It's not the distrust. It's not the you don't want someone to touch you. It's not the you don't want to fall in love again because you don't want to get hurt. It's not the you assume that every man is bad kind of way. It can be in the it literally breaks your brain, and your brain is broken for the rest of your life. I just had 3 seizures, which left me with a concussion or 2. Bit my tongue really badly. They were the worst seizures I've ever had in my entire life. I've had to quit doing the things that I was capable of doing because I have to take better care of myself. I pushed myself too far. I was too run down, and the seizures happened. And I thought that those terrible seizures were done. They are not done. And this is like 8 years later, or 7 years later. And I'm still dealing with it. And I'm still dealing with the repercussions of it. So even if it was somewhere in me to have seizures, because my mom has she doesn't have seizures, but she has passed out events. He caused them to awaken in me. And he completely changed my life. I had to drop out of school. I lost tons of jobs. I now scare my child when I have seizures. I could have a seizure and die, is what I've been told. That they could kill me. The end. I could just have a seizure and drop dead at any point. And that's really, really scary. So I really want, if you're a young person and you happen to find my channel because you're interested in toys or whatever, I really want to stress that if you're in an abusive relationship, you need to get out. Because even if you can escape the emotional baggage or the emotional trauma of it all, you might not be able to escape the long-term damage that abuse can do to your brain. I've been very fortunate in that I found a wonderful, loving man who has been there every step of the way with me, and me telling him that I have epilepsy didn't scare him off at all. He has been there with me through it all and supported me through it all. And without him, I don't know what I would do. But that's really lucky. If I had to be on my own, I couldn't, because I can't work in the normal way. My life is completely changed. And it's all because I let some silly guy who I thought that I loved, who I was just infatuated with, ruin my entire life. I let some man who wasn't worth it abuse me to the point where my brain just kind of broke. And I'll never be the same again. And now I have a child who depends on me, a husband who depends on me. And my life is forever changed because of it. So if you are in an abusive relationship, I seriously want you to get out of it. I want you to know that it's not just bruises. It's not just emotional scars. It's not just that. It can be something way bigger. It can be something completely life-altering. And it's not worth it. If someone hurts you, they don't love you. They don't love you. Mistakes happen. No relationship is perfect. But if someone continually shows you who they are, believe them. Believe them. That monster gets to live his life with his girl. They're both chiropractors. They both get to be wealthy. While I live paycheck to paycheck with my husband, barely scraping by, with, you know, like death note. I don't know how long I have. All because I was silly and I loved a guy who wasn't worth it. And if you see this, I want you to leave, and I want you to do better than I did. And I want you to know that there are long-term effects that you don't even think of when it comes to abusive relationships. Anyway, this has been long enough. I will do another video on epilepsy and what it's like. If you watch this, thank you. And if you're in a bad situation, please find a safe way to leave. Please do not repeat my mistakes. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.